Yes, can you get it?
No problem, because you're sort of looking at yourself there. There you go.
There we go. Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Bob. It's really exciting for me to be here and get to finally meet all of you. And let me explain why that's the case. I've been following this company for the last 2 years. I'm an operating partner at Chrysalis Ventures, which is a major investor in Chronicity. I'm an investor personally as well, because what you're doing is unprecedented. And my feeling has been over the past 2 years that you've been running like on a treadmill and not had the time to step back and look at your value proposition. And when Bob and others asked me to get involved with this project to help look at what Chronicity has actually done and the value that you've created, and to see if there are opportunities for you to get to the next level as a company, I was absolutely delighted to do that. And it has been a real pleasure working with the management team that is a cut above companies that I have looked at over my career at this level, where you are at that story where you're not quite yet cash flow positive, where you're not yet profitable. Every company, whether they ultimately become successful or they fail, go through a period just like this one. And sometimes they're lucky and the economy doesn't turn against them, and there are lots of other things that will get them past that barrier. But almost invariably, the successful companies make a reevaluation of their value proposition to their customers, make those changes, and the management team leads them through that change. They can't do that unless they have the support and total buy-in of the employees of the company. And what I have seen as I've looked at the data that you have collected over the years, I've been blown away with what you've been able to do with patients with these conditions that almost nobody else, I can say literally nobody else, is approaching in an organized way. So the value you're creating is unique. The results are dramatic when there's compliance. And it's a pleasure for me to be here because I wanted to meet you and talk to you and learn from you about how you've accomplished this as we go through this process of making some changes that I think ultimately is going to lead to you becoming a dramatically successful and profitable company. Let me tell you a little bit about why. So that's why I'm here. Let me explain a little bit about what I've done in my career just very briefly. My career really is a story of looking at large databases of utilization and outcomes and putting them together and creating a value proposition for a combination of enterprises. The first one was at Wake Forest. I was trained as a physician, a pathologist, but got interested in health services research and did a lot of analytical and research work myself, but ended up developing a business plan for a strategic unit for what was then an integrated delivery system of about 25 or 30 hospitals, many hundreds of doctors, and literally thousands and thousands, probably a total of about 1 million patients across a major part of North Carolina. And when I was I worked with someone not unlike Bob in the sense of being a genius in marketing, and learned how to help put the data in a format that would segment individual patients, providers, and hospitals so that they could execute successfully on that strategic model. I got interested as a physician in the fact that evidence-based medicine was beginning to take shape in the form of disease management, and got recruited to Humana, where they offered me a position as Vice President for Population Health. And it turned out that I did a couple of things. One is do exactly what I did for the integrated delivery system, except I had a much more extensive set of databases. Humana had actually never aggregated their claims on a patient level and looked at comorbidities and that sort of thing, and developed programs. We developed a internal program for managing the most comorbidly ill patients in their population. And then and the second thing that I did was look at the emerging market of disease management, which was largely small companies, completely different from my expertise, that were struggling to try and become profitable and to succeed in a highly competitive. There were 169 companies in the market, and I looked at well over half of those companies to see which ones really had the ability to begin to grow, become profitable, and ultimately got recruited to run the second largest company in that space, Core Solutions, which needed to be turned around. We had a downsizing and then built it back up and became one of only 5 or 6 companies out of that 170 to become profitable and have a successful exit. It was a venture-backed company, just like this company, and so I have the experience of looking at this, and again, same thing at Core Solutions. It was putting together large databases of utilization and outcomes to try and create a value proposition for customers. And so I've done this throughout the last 20 years of my life, and the reason, I think you can kind of tell from my enthusiasm here, I don't get involved with a lot of companies, and I don't invest in a lot of companies unless I'm convinced that you've got a value proposition and the ability and the management team and the expertise internally to create a strong value proposition for your customers. And I'm here to tell you, you've done that. And this next step of evolution and change in the company is allowing you to take a step up based on what we can learn from what you've done in the past. Bob's already articulated this very well. I'm going to be very brief here. I could spend literally hours until everybody was laid out on the floor asleep talking about data. That's one of my, it's a cross I have to bear. I love data a lot more than 99%, right? About 99% of the population, is that right? Okay. And so anyway, yeah. If you want to know all about those kinds of issues, ask him. So let me see if Bob, if we can keep going. Okay, improving outcomes. So what we've done here is we've looked at primarily data from the years 2007 and 2008. That's primarily. We've also got organized data from 2009. But what we have looked at, we had utilization statistics for all patients, and we had the VMI, or the severity and frequency scores for subsets of those patients that we could match up. In total, there are about 3 major subsets that you can think about. There's a group of about 300 patients that are perfectly matched, where we have high degree of understanding that these patients came in for an initial visit at one point, and we have a VMI that matches them, okay? We have about 800 patients over the 07 and 08 where they were active patients, but we cannot absolutely confirm that there's some utilization prior to January of 07. And then there's the larger purely utilization databases of about 8,000 patients, 4,000 of which were still active at the end of 08, and about 4,000 that were what we defined as inactive, which hadn't been seen for a specified number of days. And if we go any further than that, you'll all start falling asleep. But I wanted you to understand we're drawing our results from one or more of those data sets, but you should also understand that our findings, insofar as we can reasonably draw inferences, are all consistent regardless of size. So what we learned from the 300 is essentially applicable to the 800, which we assume is applicable to the larger group, because all of these things seem to be consistent. And so the learnings that we're taking from this are what I'm trying to summarize here. What we're trying to do here is what I've done my entire career, which is looking at best practices and seeing if there isn't a way to convert that to standard practice. And so that's really what we're trying to do. We're focusing on an outcomes-driven solution, the correlation of the amount of utilization as well as the nature of utilization, and then presenting that as a value proposition. There is a huge difference when you talk to patients about saying, we have a fully integrated program and we think we can make you better, and here's what it costs, versus We have a fully integrated program with a track record showing that if you're compliant with the following program, we can reduce your symptoms and their frequency by, on average, 40% and sustain that over a period of time. And so that's the difference that we're talking about. It's the value proposition is much more quantitatively derived, and it's much clearer, and it's dramatic. And it's taking advantage of what the people in this room have been doing over the past years to improve the lives of patients. What we've learned is the best results occur over the first 7 to 9 months. And that on average, you see about a 40% improvement of the best cohorts, which in this instant we're going to talk about the top 30%, which Bob's already presented to you. You see on average about a 40% improvement. The better news is that episodically, and I'm going to show you just a snapshot, episodically, you're improving the health of this best cohort by as much as 75% as measured by the VMI, but it's only episodic. Those kinds of improvements are not sustained. But if you ask me what I've seen from the data in my experience, I think you have the opportunity as you go through the subscription model and you encourage appropriate utilization according to what you've learned, that you can begin taking that average improvement from 40% and move it well past 50%. And that's what you should think of as this is a process. We're going to start with a set of changes here, but we're establishing a network and a framework, a structure that's going to allow us to learn more and tweak things and continue to improve those outcomes. Because if we do that, it's going to be easier for us to convince people who are suffering from these conditions that they need to be a part of this, that they don't have to worry about making hundreds of decisions. All they have to do, at best, you know, if you're willing to buy into this, and we want that kind of behavioral change initially, is make one decision. At most, you may make 2 or 3. You no longer have to make, as they may be doing right now, dozens of decisions over the period of their involvement with the company. All they have to do, as Bob said very well, is focus on getting well. So the improvements, as I'll indicate, are statistically significant. Sue has had a group working on that. I'll show you just a little bit of those data. The message here today, which is a glimpse of the future as well, is that even among the best cohorts, that top 30%, there is erosion in the improvement after 9 months. And you'll see that it's correlated with utilization dropping below about $400 a month. And certainly by the time you get to $300 a month, you're starting to see unpredictable waxing and waning even among the best cohorts. And in the least compliant cohorts, you see wild fluctuations in improvement. And in fact, I have graphs that I won't show you that by the end of 2 years, the patients who are remaining have higher VMI scores than they started with. That's not a value proposition on which you can build, a successful company. We need to be thinking about establishing a structure now that's going to continue to drive long-term, meaningful improvement. And then the last thing that I want to say is there's a substantial attrition, and that's a tragedy, because the reality is that somewhere between 40 and 70% of patients are being lost in the first 12 months. And we don't know all the reasons why, but it's not just a financial loss. It's the fact that we haven't established a structure that allows them and encourages them through this continuity of care program, the proactive aspect that you mentioned, that we've not allowed them and encouraged them to stay in the system. This is not a health club model. We are not hoping to just get your subscription and never see you again. The reality is that once patients stop utilizing the physician and drop below 2 visits out of every 3 months, we begin to see a plateauing or erosion of the VMI. And certainly by the time they're down to 1 visit a quarter, they are already starting to see erosion or wild fluctuations. So keep that in mind. We want appropriate utilization of somewhere around $500 or more, depending upon symptomatology and severity. And patients need to be seen, twice a quarter, or have the continuity of care support that Bob's already described for you that serves as an adequate proxy to encourage compliance. So it's the behavioral change and compliance that's so important here. This is the snapshot, and all I want to do is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the narrowest cohort, the 300, where we can match people up at the beginning of VMIs and utilization. And this is then by VMI, the top decile down to the bottom decile of these people. I'm just going to make a couple of brief points here. If you look at the top group up here, the initial VMI of this, I'm just going to use this as an example. You can study it and ask questions about this later. I'm going to be here till Sunday morning. But in the top decile, they have an average VMI score of about 147. Look at what the maximal VMI change is over their tenure with this program. They drop 109 points to a roughly, below 40. That's a 75% improvement. And if you look at the top 3, you're getting well over 50% improvement, okay? At the same time, look at the number of visits that we're talking about. Roughly 2 every quarter. And if you look at the number of days that it takes to achieve this, on average, it's about 8 or 9 months. Now, in your mind, if you think about those data, you think, okay, well, this is great. Everybody starts here, and they drop down gradually, and so you see the average drop down to, 60% of improvement over 9 months. That's what you would think. The problem is that the standard deviation for this is all over the map. It's all over the 9 months. And so on average, you don't see that level of improvement. It's normally about 40%, but I'm showing you this just to give you a glimpse of what potential you have in terms of improving even the best that you've got right now, and how exciting that is that you have the potential that you could actually get close to achieving this on a sustainable basis, because as Bob has already said, they don't have to keep making decisions about whether I want to spend the $300 to come and see the physician or whatever. They've made that decision. They're in the system. All they have to do is think about being well. So this is potentially what your future looks like in terms of making an impact for these patients. This is, Bob's already shown you this, and there's not much to reiterate except to say that even this blue line, this top 30%, this is, you're getting down to 40% within the first 9 months, but you're seeing a waxing and waning, and it's starting to actually trend slightly back up. And in the bottom cohort, you're seeing much wider variation. And if you look at the numbers underlying these in terms of visits, what you're seeing is, even in the top cohort, by the time you get into the second 12 months, their visits are going down to once a quarter. Their dollars are dropping down. In fact, here's the utilization. And look at what's happened by the time you get to 12 months. Almost indistinguishable. And this is my point. Once you get down to and start to broach the $400 a month, this is physician visits and nutraceuticals, IVs, everything except pharmaceutical scripts that are outside ITC. Once you get below that $400 a month, and this is with an a la carte system, obviously, they're making decisions. So even the best patients are starting to see an erosion or a waxing and waning of their VMIs. There's no longer kind of this downward trend that's potential based on that kind of what's the very best that happened for each patient during those first 9 months, okay? So the goal here is with this, don't know if it can be achieved, But the suggestion is that you can actually, with significant compliance, drive this VMI change well below 80 in the majority of patients. So the idea is you're going to have more patients with sustained improvement over a longer period of time, and the average improvement each month continues to improve. That's really the goal. That's what's driving the value proposition. It's the reason the whole company is repositioning itself, is to say, we already know this works. This works great. There's nothing like this in the market. And I'm telling you, I've looked at hundreds of companies, and there is no other company that I have looked at that can show data like this. Not one. And so the possibilities that you have to control your own future, to become dramatically successful in the marketplace, is by becoming dramatically successful in the lives of these patients, even more than you're already doing. The tragedy is that by the time you get to 12 months, as I've said, 40 to 70% of your patients are gone. And so there's opportunity for the patients who remain. There's opportunity for retaining patients who would otherwise have been lost. And so that's the challenge to you, to execute on that. All these last slides, this is on a larger cohort of patients, but the data all show the same thing. We have dramatic, excuse me. It's me, Bob. It's operator error, not. It's not. So you're seeing dramatic improvement. These are energy levels. See, notice again, by the time you're getting into the second year, you're starting to see that go back up. Well-being levels, the same thing. Where you have the low at the bottom, I'm just looking at the bottom. This is kind of reversed severity scores by all patients. It's a larger cohort. Same thing. You're losing the advantage that you had at the beginning, because everybody is following normal human nature. If I have to continue to make dozens of decisions each month in order to stay healthy, almost nobody's going to do that. What we're trying to do is establish a value proposition that will make it easy for them to do it and be proactive about reaching out to them and helping them remain compliant, being a reminder. Just like the blank, 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 blank beeper in my car reminding me to buckle my seatbelt. Okay? All right? It's going to save my life, but I sure wish it'd go away. But on the other hand, I'm glad it's there. Behavioral change, right? So again, the best results are over the first 7 to 9 months. 40% improvement. 40% improvement among the best cohorts. Episodically, well over 50%. Statistically significant improvement. However, you've got an erosion after 9 months, as well as a significant attrition issue, which are incredible opportunities for the company. So you've got the best of both worlds. You've got incredible results and incredible opportunities. And what has been my pleasure over the past 4 months in working with this management team on is to see how they've grasped onto this and say, yes, this is the kind of company we want to be. Because when it comes down to it, when you're out there talking about what I do for a living and what value I've created, you're talking about how you've measurably improved the lives of these people, and you've done it over a sustained period of time in a way that nobody can doubt. And every night you go to sleep exhausted, but you sleep really well because you know that you're changing the lives of people who don't have any place else to go to do this. And so that's why I'm excited to be involved with the company, why it's been a real pleasure for me to kind of drill down into the data. And I look forward, as I said, to hearing from you about your experiences and how you feel about where you are and what you're hearing here today, because my bet is that there won't be very many people in here who don't resonate to the fact of what the value you've created and how great the opportunity is going forward. So again, thanks very much. Pleasure.